Hello everyone. Today it is 21st June, a lazy Sunday for me, and I thought of creating an animated visualization inspired from the famous TED Talk of Rance Hosling. This is in reference to the geopolitical situation prevalent in India nowadays. Well, the topic to ponder visually is how a conflict impacts a nation's growth. Secondly, how each country grew in the last 100 or rather 70 years or so with respect to India. And can we see this in an animated manner? So I plotted this basically on the publicly available data for the entire world. Keeping the rest of the countries aside, I concentrated on the growth of India versus China post the 1940s, where the new world order started to take shape. For my understanding, I've also included countries such as Australia, Japan, Pakistan, Israel, and United States, as these are also part of a current discourse. Rest of the historical data from the year 1800 is excluded. Each of the bubble here is the size of the nation based on its population for that particular year, and it's plotted on two axes, namely the GDP per capita versus the life expectancy in years. India is shown in the blue bubble, China in red, and Pakistan in green, while the rest of the countries are shown as in the color palette here. I will pause the animation after the passage of each decade and see the learnings or what are changes has happened. So let's run the animation now from the year 1940. So if you see here, just to the start of the decade, US and Australia are in a comfortable position as far as the lifespan is concerned and prosperity is concerned. While Japan, Russia, Israel are here, somewhere here in the middle, whereas China, India, and behind that Pakistan are in the bottom left, because these were all some kind of a uh, British colonies. Let's give it a run and pause it around to 1950. Okay, while India and China are still in the bottom, struggling, rest of the countries, even after World War II miseries, have comfortably moved ahead in exponential way. Particularly if you see Israel, Russia, and Japan as well. Let's not forget, each of these nations went through the miseries of war of World War II. Let's move ahead. If you see here that in the 1960s, one can see in China falling far below due to foreign, the famine there and the government policies. India here is still waiting for any progress, considerably progress to happen, while the rest of the countries here or on the top have comfortably moved ahead as far as lifespan is concerned. Okay, now the China story has started to develop, and let's give it a pause. Here in the 1970s, China has moved very nicely as far as life expectancy is concerned. Russia and other countries are comfortably consolidating their growth here in the right side of the sector. And if you see, an average Japanese here is almost living at par with the American as far as the lifespan is concerned. Now let's move ahead. At the start of 1980s, we can see Pakistan is slightly ahead, in fact, of India and China as far as the individual prosperity of a average Pakistan is concerned. But if you see, the internal rife in Russia has started to cause some negative impact as far as their expectancy of a Russian is concerned. But slowly see this. in the 1980s, the progress has started to happen here in India and in China. Let's pause here for one sec. It's the time when India is starting to start its liberalization, and the growth story is slowly going to get started here. While Russia was formed from the USSR, we can see that there's a drastic fall in both the factors as far as life expectancy and the prosperity is concerned. Let's pause for the Russia. Let's keep the story of Russia here in mind, how the internal conflict can impact a nation. Both Japan and here Israel have now growing in a linear manner instead of the earlier exponential growth which we had noticed earlier in the 19 say 50s or so. And now we can see that China and India are working almost in a linear manner here. So we can see that China's growth has definitely started to beat India. Russia is still to recover due to its conflict, and we can see the prosperity of Pakistan here has started to uh, quite dwindle and due to its start of proxy war. And if you see that average Japanese is living a longer life than an average American here. You can see that China is definitely growing. The China story is inspiring the world, and people are starting to notice. Let's pause at 2010 here. We can see that China has definitely left India behind as far as the per capita GDP is concerned. India is also growing linearly, but growing for sure. Growth in developed countries here has now more or less concentrated near this 50,000 K mark at an average basis. Moving ahead, let's pause here, which is the today's timeline. Whereas average Chinese has a much better quality of lifespan and at par with an average Israeli, Australian, or a Japanese. And it has definitely moved ahead with regard to majority of India. Whereas in India, there is a lot of reforms which is yet to percolate to the common citizens. And also notice the size of the two bubbles of China and India, almost at par. The population is almost equal. This is the situation as of today. Now here on the data is extrapolated for us to see the future. So let's see where we want to go as a nation. If you see here, the next 20 years or so, this is how the story should pan in case there are no conflicts or same reforms go on. And one can see that by the year 2030, 2040, India's population is going to outpower Chinese population. And Pakistan will fall somewhere here, but it is having a huge population, but it's going to lag behind with majority of India's per capita. But let's imagine another scenario of a conflict in case of two major countries here or two, three different countries. So let's think that what we have learned in so far, few insights. That's clearly one that is clearly difficult for any country, for that matter, Japan, Israel, to maintain a linear exponential growth forever. Secondly, any conflict, such as in case of Russia, brings a lot of death and destruction. And a recovery from wars is actually not a linear way. It is varied for each nation. While some grow back exponentially, such as Japan, others slog for a long time, such as Russia. But the bottom line is, a war is definitely masks the growth of fighting nations. Thirdly, growth of a nation can happen given conducive ecosystem is created and which as such has happened in India post 1991 or in China post in somewhere around 1970s. And the larger the population, the more difficult it is to pull it all across for better quality of life. Countries such as Israel and Japan, having to work with a smaller population, could quickly rebound even after wave of destruction, whereas population heavy nations such as India and China are still struggling to make it into big league. Fourthly, And lastly, so I hope this message is taken in the correct spirit and that is best to avoid any conflict. So this is it from my side. And as a lastly, it's honest disclaimer that it's intentional just to make this visualization to put my perspective across. It is strictly not a prescription to any political party or policymakers, nor it is blame any nation or their historical leaders. It's just what a data is saying.